Hey, everybody. Welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Minnesota Congresswoman Angie Craig back with us. We'll chat with her in just a moment. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and/or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So Angie Craig is the Congresswoman for Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District and is running for the state's junior Senate seat being vacated by the retiring Tina Smith. In 2018, she flipped a district held by a Republican that a Democrat had only held twice since the 1940s, committing herself to taking on the Trump administration's policies that are hurting working folks in our country. In the Senate, her focus will be on lowering costs, keeping communities safe, and fixing a broken Washington. If elected to the Senate, Angie would make history as the first gay U.S. Senator from Minnesota and first lesbian mother elected to the Senate. Congresswoman, welcome back into the back room.
Thank you. There's a lot to talk about, Andy.
There sure is. Let's start with the campaign. You've been in the House for 6 years. You're now running for the Senate seat being vacated by the retiring Tina Smith. You've been ahead in polling, fundraising, and are picking up key endorsements like Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, Pete Buttigieg. Campaign's doing well. Give us an overall update.
Yeah, the campaign's doing really well. We are all over the state of Minnesota. And, over the last 10, 12 days, though, the last thing on my mind has been running for the U.S. Senate. Although what I would say is the best thing I can do for the state of Minnesota right now is show them what kind of U.S. Senator I will be. And that's what I've been focused on, right? From standing up to my complicit Republican colleagues on the House floor to filing articles of impeachment against Kristi Noem, from performing my congressional oversight duties at a federal building that we were denied access to. The best thing I can do is just keep showing up and fighting and showing Minnesota what kind of fighter they would be sending to the U.S. Senate.
Well, the primary is in August. You're running against Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. What are the key distinctions between you that you'd like Minnesota voters to know about most?
Well, look, we both have progressive values. I've been in the Congress for over 6 years now, and Republicans every single cycle have run campaign ads against me saying I vote with Democrats 97% of the time. So, there you go. From a swing district in Minnesota, we expect very soon Michelle Tafoya, who's a former NFL sideline reporter, to get into this race. And, what I want your viewers to remember is Minnesota has a tied state house and a one-seat Democratic majority in the state Senate. I'm the only candidate who's been on the ballot by myself in a competitive race against a Republican. Look, the lieutenant governor has run on the ticket with Governor Walz. But I can promise you, because we're already seeing it back home, Republicans are attacking her left and right because she was the number 2 executive in Minnesota. And we have had some massive fraud issues. And, the governor has taken responsibility for that. Mm-hmm. I wish the lieutenant governor would take some responsibility instead of sort of shoving it all to Governor Walz. Frankly, that pisses me off for my friend Tim Walz. But nonetheless, I'm the only candidate on the ballot who has a history of winning tough races against Republicans. And, we all could go through every single item. We're both progressive Democrats. And at the end of the day, the only way we stop Donald Trump, Kristi Noem, and ICE is by winning elections. That's it. That's the only way we stop them.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you, you're raising some interesting points because there's this confluence right now of a scandal in your home state. There's also the ICE raids and the aggressive tactics and the violence and the shooting death of Renee Good, all of which I want to get to specifically in a little bit. But how are all these things coming together in terms of the dynamic of the race and your campaign specifically? I mean, you began touching on that a little bit before.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Renee Good should be alive today. Becca Good should have her wife alive today. Mm-hmm. And that's been my highest priority over the last 12 days, just full stop. I've done everything in my current role as a sitting member of Congress to fight ICE and this administration at every turn. But the truth is, there is a Senate race ongoing in the background here. And honestly, my view of the world is that the lieutenant governor should join me in fighting the Trump administration and ICE. And unfortunately, she's taken this opportunity to attack a fellow Democrat. Right now, look, there's plenty of time between now and August, but right now, we need to come together and fight ICE, fight Kristi Noem, fight funding for an out-of-control Department of Homeland Security, and fight Donald Trump and Republicans and our Republican colleagues. So, I would just say the dynamic in Minnesota is that, the lieutenant governor is using this moment to attack me. And I would simply say, why don't you join me in fighting Donald Trump? That would be a better moment to capture.
Yeah. How much do you think this fraud mess is impacting Minnesota, Minneapolis, the governor, Mayor Jacob Frey, in trying to deal with what's going on the ground? Is it overshadowing? Is it fueling Donald Trump? Is it just creating more of a mess right now than it should?
Well, look, I don't think Donald Trump knows what the hell he's doing most of the time. He's just throwing stuff into the ether. So, but look, Democrats, we have to acknowledge that in state government, there has been some fraud issues. Governor Walz has acknowledged that and said unequivocally that, he is going to focus on doing his job as governor, focus on closing the barn door for folks who may have defrauded and, potentially would continue. So, that's an acknowledgement. Today in Congress, I actually introduced legislation, and it was a reintroduction. I introduced it back in 2023 that would set forward both additional criminal and civil penalties for anyone who defrauds the federal government and any of its funding programs. So, I've been in this fight at the federal level to try to add criminal and civil penalties. But at the end of the day, those in charge of state government, Governor Walz specifically, and frankly, the lieutenant governor should be focused on this. We've got to make sure that no one in Minnesota lacks confidence in state government. And, as a federal representative, I haven't had anything to do with running the state government. But I think it's got to be a focus for Governor Walz, and it is a focus for him. And I just think the lieutenant governor should, take a little more responsibility for what's going on in the state. She certainly takes credit for all the good things that happen, paid family leave in Minnesota, but none of the responsibility or accountability. And frankly, I just don't think that's good leadership on the part of the lieutenant governor.
With regard to ICE, you mentioned before funding. There's a bill going to be coming up. A lot of Democrats have been frustrated with leadership. A lot of congressional Democrats have expressed their own frustration with leadership. We see our leadership calling for the requirement of taking off masks, of greater use of search warrants, when it feels like the bulk of Democrats want to defund ICE or to do something shy of that to really control this out-of-control behavior. Where do you stand on this bill? What do you think is going to happen? What should happen?
Well, first of all, I won't vote to send a penny to Trump's ICE, to Kristi Noem's ICE, not an additional penny. And of course, we need reforms like not wearing masks, proper identification. Of course, we need body cams on these people. But anyone in Congress or in the U.S. Senate right now who believes that Trump's ICE, Noem's ICE, would actually follow the law if we passed it, is living in la la land.
Yeah.
What I see in Minnesota, what I spent my day yesterday doing in addition to Martin Luther King Jr. activities? Trying to find one of my constituents who was taken on Saturday, flown to El Paso, and was scheduled for dialysis yesterday. And so we spent the day trying with his doctor, right? Like, this is how serious this 40-year-old's health situation is. On the ground in Minnesota, like, they aren't following the laws. It's certainly within the constitutional rights of an individual to peacefully film what ICE is doing on a sidewalk, and yet they are slamming people to the ground. Does anyone think ICE would actually obey the law? So, look, at the end of the day, I'm going to keep coming back to this for your viewers because I think it's a really important point that sometimes as Democrats we miss. The only way we stop these sons of bitches is by winning elections. Take back the U.S. House, take back the U.S. Senate in preparation for taking back the White House in 2028. It's going to be a really long next 3 years, folks. It just is.
Yeah, well, that's a good point you're raising. And at this point, everyone assumes that there's going to be a flipping of the House. I mean, traditionally, the president in their first midterm loses control of at least one chamber of Congress. Some people are calling for a blue tidal wave. They see 40, 50, 60 seats. But what's interesting is that earlier this year, the idea that Democrats could win back the Senate seemed near impossible. But there's now a belief that Ohio, Maine, North Carolina, Alaska, possibly Iowa could be creating a viable path to victory. How realistic do you think that is?
Well, I don't want to throw a wet blanket on the optimism of Democrats because I think we have to continue operating as if this is going to be a dogfight. I mean, they're doing everything in their power to try and cheat their way to a win. Look, it will stun some of your viewers when I quote the Wall Street Journal poll from this weekend. By a 28-point margin, Americans still believe Republicans are the best party on border security. That Republicans, by an 11 percentage points, that they are the best party that most represents their views on immigration enforcement in this country. Again, let's just be real here with where the American people are on some of these issues. For example, even people in Minnesota right now under siege who believe that the Trump administration has gone way too far and ICE's tactics have gone way too far, still think Republicans are better on border security and immigration. It's insane. I know. But I think we have to be realistic about these things because, we're communicating to audiences that are not the blue bubbles that most people in the Democratic Party live within. I mean, that's one of the unique things that I bring to the Senate race that I've always brought to my congressional races. I won my D+3 district. I've been a frontliner, one of the toughest districts in America, 4 cycles now. I won it last cycle by 14 percentage points, right? So outperforming the index of my congressional district by, 11 points, 12 points. Tim Walz, Kamala Harris, they only won my district by 5. I won by 14. And the reason I say this is because we got to get out of our blue bubble. We got to go out and talk to people again in this country. And that's what I bring to the Senate race is, I'm not afraid to go out and get yelled at by Republicans. Now, look, I'm not talking to the MAGA base, but there are still like a sliver, 8%, 10%, who are persuadable voters. Sure. And we've got to make sure that we are talking about the things that they care the most about. We just saw my friends Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill sworn in. We have to fight ICE with all of our might, absolutely throw down. And we have to remember that the main issue in most people's lives is the budget, the bills that they can't pay at the end of the month. We have to keep that in mind as we're thinking about 2026. So maybe we have a blue wave. I don't think there are as many seats out there this time around as there were in 2018 when we flipped. I think I had 64 members of the class of 2018 that I came in with. But I certainly am optimistic. And, we've got a real shot to take back the U.S. Senate. And that is why we cannot let a seat like Minnesota in a D+3 state even be in play in 2026. And I know that I will not allow that seat to be in play.
Yeah, well, the key is what you said a couple of times now, and that is voting. And I always stress that. I say, look, have all the optimism you want, but none of it actually will eventuate without voting. Okay. But interestingly, you look at other polling that shows that Donald Trump is underwater on immigration. And we're starting to maybe see that in the minds of Republicans, even some in MAGA, there's a distinction between border security and the shit that's happening on the streets of Minneapolis and elsewhere. And maybe that is the reason why we're seeing he's by 35 points or so seen a flip with his support among Hispanics, among young people, young men, the Joe Rogan criticism that we're continuing to see. So my hope is that the base starts to really view those two things separately. But will they go, hey, I don't like this, I don't like that, and I don't like that. But at the end of the day, I'll still support what Trump wants, and I'll still support Republicans. That is where we got to move them from.
Yeah, that's that sliver, right? I mean, some of those folks you're never going to move, 36, 38%. They are who they are. And I think we have to come to terms with many of those are never going to call themselves Democrats, right? I'm used to a lot of people in my district voting for me who would never call themselves a Democrat.
Yeah, who cares?
And who cares? As long as they vote for us, right? You don't have to be a Democrat to vote for a damn Democrat,
and
right?
Guess what?
That's
you vote in private. You vote in private. Nobody sees who you vote for.
That's right. And I think that's for Democrats, especially on things like immigration and border security. We have to realize that he did tap into this feeling in the Biden administration that there were so many people coming across the southern border that perhaps we didn't know everyone who came across for a period of time. Now, after June of 2024, the Biden administration put some restrictions on that. But I think we have to understand that people want border security. They want to know who's coming into our country, right? They aren't violent criminals. And we need to be, I say that out loud all the time because I think it's important to be said. I can say that, and I can say the tactics that the Trump administration is using in Minnesota are horrific. That most of the people they are detaining have no criminal history whatsoever. The only crime, and I had an ICE agent tell me this when I was attempting to visit the Federal Whipple Center. I said I was specifically asking about a couple of my own constituents who I understood had been detained there. And I said, well, what crime have they committed? And he looked at me and he said, the crime is being in this country. That's the crime. And look, a lot of the people they're rounding up in Minnesota, they're on temporary protected status or have been. They have a valid work permit, and they're still rounding them up because they're black or brown. We had a hearing in Minnesota last Friday, and one of the most chilling things that I heard was from a U.S. citizen who had been detained by ICE at a federal building for about 12 hours. And she said that there was a sign on some of the rooms that said U.S. citizens only. What the hell are you putting a U.S. citizen in an ICE detention center? I mean, it really should be chilling to the entire nation.
Well, that's the distinction that I spoke to before. I hope that Republican voters in their minds go, okay, this is not securing the border. Minneapolis is a long way. I mean, what border are we talking about?
Canada, apparently.
Canada?
Right.
Yeah,
Canada.
So let's talk about the shooting and the violence on the streets of Minneapolis. The videos and our eyes don't lie. Yet the Justice Department has concluded that there's no reason to criminally investigate the agent, Jonathan Ross, but they are investigating Renee Good and her wife, Becca. To what extent can and is Minnesota state and local authorities conducting its own investigation? Or is that just not happening?
Well, I think to the extent that we are. Certainly in the very early hours of that killing, Minnesota local and state investigators were involved in the process, but obviously without access to the vehicle, without access to an autopsy, all of those things, it makes it very, very difficult. And look, I mean, I got into it with the number 3 Republican in the country, Tom Emmer, my colleague from Minnesota, right after the shooting that evening on the House floor, because, to highlight that someone and call someone a domestic terrorist, when, as you said, we watched it with our own eyes, right? I'm not mad at you, dude.
Right.
Were her last words. Are you kidding me?
And what were his last words?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I'll say it here, fucking bitch.
Yeah, you can say it.
We need to remind people what this man
remind
said
people.
after
Yeah,
he put three
That's
bullets
right.
into her head.
That's right. After he violated every basic rule of law enforcement, standing in front of her vehicle multiple times, she clearly was trying to get away in a very dangerous situation that had escalated because of the behavior of ICE agents. And, back home in Minnesota this weekend, I talked to several of my local police chiefs and mayors. One of the things that some of my mayors are and police chiefs are encouraging the public to do is when ICE rolls up, just call 911. That's what they're telling folks, because often when local PD arrive, they can de-escalate ICE. Think about what they're saying to me. Federal agents need local police officers to come and de-escalate them. It's not the culture that's being built by DHS is one that, frankly, is going to continue to get people killed.
Well, do you believe ICE is out of control? Because if we do believe that ICE is out of control and they're acting like thugs, we see the videos, and not just what happened to Renee Good. We see what they're doing every single day on the streets to undocumented immigrants as well as U.S. citizens.
Right.
Well, isn't that what the local police are for? Or should the local police go, hey, we'll protect you from everyone except federal agents?
Well, my local PD are caught right in the middle of this horrific situation because their duty is to keep our community safe. And when you feel like you got to roll up and keep community members safe from federal law enforcement, that is a really, really difficult situation. I heard a story yesterday, and the source, I'm absolutely convinced it's true. A lot of these ICE agents are rolling up with out-of-state plates, so it makes them pretty easy to identify. And a police chief told me yesterday that, the ICE agents are now lifting plates off of vehicles and putting them on their vehicles. Think about that. They're stealing license plates so that the community won't know they're rolling in their neighborhoods. That's the kind of shit that's happening in Minnesota every single day. It's just, they pulled a St. Paul man out of his home in negative 11 degrees.
Right, in his bathrobe.
In his bathrobe, right? Like, it's just unbelievable and of course, as it turns out, he's a U.S. citizen, that
Right.
mistaken identity. Obviously, these folks are profiling. They were door to door in a mobile home park in the rural part of my district over the weekend, asking neighbors to point out Hispanic, Asian neighbors. These are the tactics that they're deploying right now in America, and it's horrific.
Yeah. Well, when you think about, again, what we all saw with our own eyes, when you think about what J.D. Vance said, that we should all, maybe the agent was being sensitive because of what happened to him in June, where he was dragged 300 feet and required 33 stitches, which would be legit. Mental health is a big issue in this country, and that sounds like a traumatic experience that he went through. But the key question is, should he have been carrying a gun and in that situation where he may have overreacted? And so pulling all this together, there has to be a fair, impartial investigation. Do you think public opinion will eventually force this administration to change its position and bring in state and local authorities?
I would love to say yes, but I'm going to tell you that we have such chicken shit members of Congress in Minnesota on the Republican side. I think
The whole country.
In the whole country right now. I think public pressure, I think political pressure from his own party would make a difference here. But until we see that, until we see 4 patriots in the Republican Party, I can't find them right now. It's just extraordinary. I mean, more people have spoken out about the lunacy of taking Greenland than they have about the loss of life of a human being in Minnesota. And instead of speaking out, they actually elevated Kristi Noem's domestic terrorism claim and have supported the fact that there should be no accountability for the ICE agent who murdered Renee Good. So, public pressure, the public in Minnesota, we want ICE to leave Minnesota. And frankly, what's interesting is a Republican state House member called me this weekend on a case because, my office is helping with locate a bunch of constituents. He had a constituent who was missing. We found him in El Paso. And the thought that's going through their heads right now is just how bad this activity is for their own electoral chances. Their frontline members, their swing district Republicans are looking at public opinion back home in Minnesota and saying, holy shit, we got a problem here because of the tactics of ICE. No one wants this situation. No one wants to be thinking about the politics of this, but public opinion is everything. And when Donald Trump and the goons in ICE do what they're doing, it does sway public opinion against the Republican Party.
Governor Walz has the National Guard on standby. There are a lot of people who are like, yeah, that would be great. And there's also a lot of people who are like, oh, my God, that would just inflame things. So where you stand on troop deployment, National Guard troop deployment in Minneapolis?
Well, I trust that the governor is going to do the right thing, that if it is in the interest of public safety, that he will deploy the National Guard. I and the governor and Mayor Fry, Mayor Herr of St. Paul, we've all continued to say to constitutional observers and protesters, by all means, these are your constitutional rights, but stay nonviolent. We don't need you to cross that line, because that's exactly what Donald Trump and these folks want. They want to be able to activate the 1,500 paratroopers in Alaska, apparently, who they have on call, ready to come to Minnesota if necessary. So, as far as our National Guard is concerned, they need to be on standby right now. We need to make sure that things don't get out of control. But we need to make sure that we continue to highlight that it would be an extraordinary move on the part of this president, without the consent of a state's governor, to invoke the Insurrection Act and send active duty military troops to the streets of Minnesota. And remember, Andy, crime is down in Minneapolis.
Of course.
The mayor keeps saying it. We've had 4 shootings this year in Minneapolis, and 2 of them have been ICE agents as the shooter.
Right. Well, it's all a charade.
That's right. It's a charade. Look, it's political retribution. I think we rank number 24 in the nation for undocumented immigrants. Like, why are you targeting us if not for political retribution?
Yeah. Do you think things are going to get worse in Minneapolis before they get better?
Well, I think that is up to ICE. That's up to Kristi Noem and Donald Trump. And I would simply say that Minnesotans are going to keep showing up for their neighbors. We're going to keep speaking out. I'm going to keep standing up to the goons in the Trump administration who are making our communities less safe. I'm going to keep standing up for my local law enforcement who are telling me that actually they're making their jobs much harder in Minnesota right now to protect and serve and basic 911 services that people need. So, do I think things are going to get materially better in Minnesota? I think we could be in for a little bit of a long while. Do I think that our nation is going to get better? I do. And I know that sounds crazy right now.
No, I believe
But look, folks, it's going to take democracy to save democracy. The only way we can stop these sons of bitches is by winning elections. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't say I'd love for your viewers to learn more about my Senate race at angiecraig.com. If you want somebody in the Senate who is going to stand up to these folks just as hard as I am in the U.S. House, I need to be in the Senate.
And for the folks who don't live in Minnesota, you can send money to that to Angie's campaign. So, Congresswoman, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your insights. And do come back again before the primary for sure.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhinecliff, with additional editing by Maddie Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Langell. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.